Hi, everybody. Welcome to Big Game Bound. I'm Jack Doles, and we're into week 6 of the NFL season, and we're down to 2 undefeated teams, the New England Patriots and the San Francisco 49ers. Coming up on this week's show, our big shout-outs, the NFL Players of the Week. What the Halleck? Ty Halleck joins us to help break down one of the big matchups, the Lions versus the Packers. We've also got correspondents to talk about the Seahawks versus Browns and also the surprising 49ers. Our big guest, Joe Levine, the director of A Lifetime of Sundays, and your big decisions will help you make those for fantasy football with football diehards, Bob Harris. Let's start with our big shout-outs. The NFC Offensive Player of the Week is Green Bay running back Aaron Jones. He rushed for 107 yards and 4 touchdowns in the Packers' win over the Dallas Cowboys. Jones also had 7 receptions for 75 yards. The NFC Defensive Player of the Week is 49er rookie Nick Bosa. He sacked Baker Mayfield twice, hit him 5 times. In the Niners' win over the Browns, he also recorded 5 hits, a forced fumble, and recovered a fumble. He dominated the Browns' O-line. The AFC Offensive Player of the Week, no surprise here, Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson threw for 426 yards and 5 touchdown passes in the Texans' rout of the Atlanta Falcons. And the AFC Defensive Player of the Week is Justin Houston of the Indianapolis Colts. He went into Kansas City and terrorized his former team, had a sack, 4 tackles, 2 for a loss, as the Colts held Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in check. All right, Ty Halleck joins us now for What the Halleck. Ty played with the Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars. You played at Lambeau in these Lions-Packers games. Packers used to own the Lions at Lambeau. Lions have won the last 2 there. What do they have to do to make it 3 in a row?
Well, I think if they want to win, they have to run the football. I mean, it comes through Kerryon Johnson. He's going to have to, and the line's going to have to give them the opportunities to run the ball. You're going to have to protect Matthew Stafford, but it really comes down to the run. You don't want Aaron Rodgers out on the football field right now. Look, there is a healthy tension between he and Matt LaFleur. I think Aaron Rodgers has been around a long time. He knows and understands what they're trying to do. Matt LaFleur actually is kind of part of that West Coast lineage that even McCartney had there, with some new ideas, some new energy. And although there's a little bit of struggle at times, you can see it in the sidelines, the Green Bay Packers are figuring it out. Aaron Jones last week really came out as the man, even though Jamal Williams is hurt right now for the Green Bay Packers. 4 touchdowns, over 100 yards against the Dallas Cowboys. And they come up with a big win in Jerry's world. I mean, you really thought, you know, I had Dallas Cowboys in the top 5 last week. Felt like Dak Prescott was playing well. The defense was playing well. They had playmakers. And all of a sudden, here comes Aaron Rodgers, who this guy just has a way of making plays, delivering the football to multiple guys. But that encompassed with this run game now in a total purpose back in Aaron Rodgers that can catch, or excuse me, Aaron Jones, who can catch the ball out of the backfield and run the football well. Boy, I tell you what, the Green Bay Packers are a real deal.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about Rodgers and LaFleur. How has LaFleur handled this so far, and how much does a new coach walk on eggshells when he's got to deal with a guy, kind of a diva, but a fantastic quarterback, somebody that key to your team?
Well, I think the way he's doing it right now is probably the right way. I mean, look, he's a younger coach. He's trying to establish himself. He certainly has background in big-time college football in the professional league, but he's a younger, dynamic mind. You see that kind of across the league now with some of the hires they're making. And guys like Aaron Rodgers, I think, aren't quite sure how to take him because they're, you know, similar ages or at least close enough where it's kind of like, how are you the head coach and I'm still a quarterback scenario. But I think they're figuring it out. And I think that he's doing it in a way where he's allowing Aaron Rodgers to be himself and deliver the football and be creative and do those things, but also command the game, call plays when appropriate, and stick with the run game and do the things they're doing that's making them successful. So I think there's a good, healthy balance there, and I think that's part of his success early on here.
Yeah, but the Lions now won 4 straight over Green Bay. All right, change in your top 5.
Absolutely.
Buffalo Bills and
That's right. There's nothing like circling the wagons of the Buffalo Bills, right? Hey, look, Buffalo is like a theme in this top 5. When I look at these teams, at the end of the day, it's defense. I mean, defense wins championships. A lot of people aren't able to score on them. If Allen's healthy and they can continue to run the ball like they have, I like the Buffalo Bills. Kansas City drops to 4. They've been a number 2 for quite some time. But look, the Indianapolis Colts come in Jacoby Brissett, they figure out a way to win. It's a close game, certainly, but Mahomes, a little bit dinged up, and it shows you he is at least human, even though he threw for 300 yards. I like them at number 4. Green Bay Packers, look, if Aaron Rodgers keeps throwing the football around and he's got a buddy in Aaron Jones, look, life's going to be good in Green Bay. And they, like I said, they got a good test against the Detroit Lions this weekend. New Orleans Saints, who would have thunk it? You know, you lose Drew Brees, and Teddy Bridgewater comes in 314 yards last week, and he scores 4 touchdowns. I mean, unbelievable. And they, by the way, have a very, very good defense. And then we come back to the New England Patriots. Simply, they're the most balanced. They've got a great offense, great quarterback. They figure out ways to win. Even when they went up to Buffalo, they won there in a close game, but they did it with their defense and special teams, and their quarterback happened to be participating that day. So I like the New England Patriots still at the top, but I like to mix it up a little bit. I'm more intrigued, as we talked about just before we got on, 6 through 10 is pretty interesting too. There's still a lot of good football teams that will work their way in here by the end of the year.
Another big game this week is Seattle at Cleveland. Aaron Levine is the sports director at Q13. He joins us again. Aaron, they're one of 3 teams right now in the NFC sitting at 4-1, coming off that big win over the Rams. Now they've got a 1 o'clock kickoff. Are these early kickoffs on the East Coast an issue for this team at all?
Historically, they are, but under Pete Carroll, they haven't been. In fact, the Seahawks are actually 12-6 in their last 18 road games that have started at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's how we talk about it around here. Then again, they haven't started a season 3-0 on the road since 1980, so they're trying to buck some history later this week. And also remember, the Browns might have the home field advantage this week, but the Seahawks played all the way back last Thursday. That means they have 10 days of rest. The Browns had to play Monday night all the way on the West Coast. That means they didn't get back until Tuesday morning. So rest and recovery is clearly an advantage for the Seahawks, who had 4 extra days to prepare this week.
Yeah, and you mentioned 3-0 on the road. If they win this game, what makes this a good road team?
I'm really not sure. In fact, 2 years ago, the Seahawks actually won more road games than they did at home, which was for the first time in forever. It could be distractions. I mean, there are fewer distractions on the road. It could be that this group just likes being doubted, and the knock on them historically is that they struggle away from home. Bradley McDougald also said earlier today that they made a change this season where all the players go on buses to the stadium at the same time. In the past, there were multiple times you could go to the field from the team hotel. He tells me they just want to do everything together as a team to build unity. And there's also a small incentive for the veterans. When they win a game on the East Coast, they get to take the coaches' seats in first class on the plane ride home. I know that happened in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago.
That's big incentive there, Aaron. Any concern about taking on a team? You already mentioned that the Browns get the short rest here, but any concern about taking on a team that just got it handed to them in the last game?
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that most NFL teams usually aren't as bad as they seem. There's a lot of parity in this league. And usually after an embarrassing loss, teams come out extra focused the following week. Plus, after all the preseason expectations in Cleveland, they're now just 2-3. They have to go to New England next week. So the Browns are going to play some desperate football this weekend, because if they lose on Sunday, they're going to be 2-4, staring at 2-5 after a game against the Patriots next week. That means the Seahawks are going to be facing a Browns team that's all in on Sunday.
We've talked a lot on this show about the NFC North and how strong it is. Make a case for the NFC West being the best division in football.
I think when it comes to the NFC North, all 4 teams can win that division, but you also have 3 teams at the top of the NFC West right now who can contend for a divisional crown. And the team in 3rd place right now is actually the one that went to the Super Bowl last year and has one of the most prolific offenses in the league, and talking about the Rams. I think the Niners show that they're for real on Monday Night Football. They finally have a solid defense that can complement Kyle Shanahan's offensive attack. And then the Seahawks are always solid. They always tend to overachieve compared to expectations. So I think the NFC West and the NFC North are probably the 2 best divisions in football right now, probably tied. But as Arizona continues to get better and Kyler Murray develops, the NFC West will become the clear front runner.
Our Cleveland Browns correspondent is John Telich, sports director at Fox 8 in Cleveland. John, big expectations in Cleveland this year. 5 weeks in, the Browns are 2-3 and coming off an ugly loss on Monday Night Football. Is this a case of, hey, relax, it's early, or is the concern level rising now in Cleveland?
Well, I think there were incredibly high expectations because of the amount of talent that was picked up by the Browns in the offseason. OBJ, Olivier Vernon, and then the second year, the progression of Baker Mayfield into year number 2. He had such a great second half of 2018. But then so far it's been way high, way low. No consistency. Haven't put 2 games together in a row. They've been very good one game and then not so good, as you saw, against San Francisco on Monday night. So still a work in progress. Plenty of talent. They just have not figured it out, Jack, how to get things done.
All right, Baker Mayfield, 8 interceptions in 5 games, been sacked 16 times. What's the problem? Is it more his play or the offensive line?
I think it's a little bit of each. There's been many instances this year where he has had an open receiver. He is set to fire, maybe a little antsy, but Jack, he has not been hitting his throws in the manner that he did in 2018. So he has been inaccurate. He's been a little bit skittish in the pocket because the line has changed. The protection does not seem to be what you had in the second half of a year ago. Also a year ago, you had Freddie Kitchens running the offense, something that he schemed, he devised. This year it's Todd Monken scheming, Freddie calling the plays, so there's not that synchronization of the offensive parts. On one play, it's the offensive line. On another play, it's a receiver dropping a ball. On a third play, it could be 2 guys in the wrong spot, ball in that area, and it's picked off. A lot of things happening, not much very good so far.
All right, Freddie Kitchen, first-time head coach. Is he being out-coached? Are we seeing some growing pains here?
Well, I would say definitely in the game against San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan put on a clinic, and I don't think Freddie was able to counter what Kyle was doing with that zone blocking, and they ran up and down the football field against the Browns. So you definitely are seeing a rookie coach, perhaps overwhelmed at times because he's dealing with the mechanizations of getting the team together during the week, getting the team ready on Sunday, having to be the guy to call the plays, and then also be in charge of what's around him. It may be a little overwhelming. He's very low-key kind of an individual. Things look like they just roll right off of his back, so he does look nonplussed out there on the sidelines. But so far, I would give him a C- at best, so as far as how he has coached the Cleveland Browns.
One of the biggest surprise stories in the NFL this season has to be the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers and Patriots, the only undefeated teams left in the league. Mark Carpenter is our big game bound correspondent from San Francisco, from Cron out there. Mark, are they for real?
Well, Jack, it depends on who you ask, all right? Because you have one section of fans thinking, hey, this team is elite. This team can make a deep run. And you look at all the great statistics, just outstanding in terms of offense, rushing, yards, and points per game, right? They're really putting it all together. But then also, too, there's another section of fans that are thinking, okay, it's nice to see this against the Bucs, the Bengals, and the Browns, and the Steelers that had Mason Rudolph, but what's it going to look like later on in the year when you're playing the Seahawks? What's it going to look like against the Rams? What's it going to look like against the Saints? So, yeah, there's great optimism here, but hey, there's some people saying, let's be careful. Let's see what it looks like against the upper echelon teams.
Yeah, pump the brakes just a bit. 49ers have already matched last year's win total, haven't finished 500 since 2014. Are they ready to contend for a division title?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the important thing, too, is this is a team that is winning the games and beating the teams that they are supposed to, all right? You look at the early part of the schedule, and people will say, yeah, well, you know, you played all these easy teams. You look at how much of a mess the Bengals are, and the Browns are maybe not who we thought they were going into the season, all this Super Bowl hype and talk, but they're winning the games they're supposed to. And then also, too, you look elsewhere in the division, the Rams offense hasn't looked as dominant as it was last year. Also, the Seahawks, yeah, they had a good game against the Rams, but if that Greg Zuerlein kick goes through, we're having an entirely different conversation. So right now, you stack up the wins, and then you're already talking about a LA team that has 2 losses. The Seahawks, we want to see more of it throughout the season. People talk about how loaded the San Francisco schedule is in the second half of the year. Take a look at Seattle's schedule. They're going to still have to play the Eagles. They have to play the Saints. They have to play the Panthers. And so right now, the 49ers are in a fantastic spot to win the NFC West.
All right, so Mark, their plus 70 point differential. Only the Patriots are higher. Only the Patriots have given up fewer points. Yet they have nobody near the top 10 in the league in sacks or tackles. What is the identity of this defense?
Well, the identity goes to what defensive coordinator Robert Saleh says. The mantra of this defense is all gas, no brakes. And yeah, you mentioned the tackles and the sacks, but you look at the takeaways, all right? This team is among the top in the league in takeaways, and this is a squad that last year just had a handful of interceptions and turnovers. Right now, they have 11. They thrive on other teams making mistakes. We saw that in that Monday night game against the Browns, how they were constantly harassing Baker Mayfield, never let him get comfortable. We knew the pass rush was going to be good, and they have delivered. You have Nick Bosa, you got Dee Ford, you got DeForest Buckner, you got Eric Armstead, and then it takes the edge off the back end, all right? You got Quan Alexander. He doesn't have to do too much. Richard Sherman, because you have that pass rush, the onus isn't all in the secondary, so it really is a complete unit, and they have really delivered.
Yeah, Bosa was so good on Monday night. There was some talk before this season. Jimmy Garoppolo was a horrible practice player. Was that just noise? Does that matter when he wins on the field?
Oh, absolutely. It was a noise, too. And, there were some questions about him in the preseason, okay, because he is coming back from the ACL injury. You go back to that preseason game against the Broncos. He looked skittish out there. He had the happy feet. He was throwing interceptions. He was making mistakes. But that's okay, because it was the preseason. It was the exhibition. You can make mistakes during that time of year. You're reading all the practice reports. But then when you get to the actual games, he has been great. And the other thing, too, is it's not all on him. And Kyle Shanahan has created this offense where, you know what? The pressure isn't entirely on Garoppolo. You have a great run game, all right? Despite no Jerick McKinnon, Tevin Coleman has missed a few games. He's turned guys like Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert into dynamic threats to the point where teams now, they have to game plan for the run game, which is an elite rushing attack. And so Garoppolo doesn't have to do everything. He doesn't need to throw 40 to 50 times a game in order for this offense to work. And right now, it has been a great formula for this squad.
Time for our big guest, and I'm excited to introduce you to famed sports documentarian Joe Levine. Ali Frazier won One Nation, Magic and Bird, A Courtship of Rivals. He also produced documentaries on Joe Louis, Joe Namath, Ted Williams, some of the most iconic names in sports history. And his latest work is when he directed A Lifetime of Sundays. It's a look at the history of the NFL through 4 iconic owners, all 4 women. Joe joins us from New York right now. And Joe, what inspired this project?
Well, it has a long history. Jane Goodell, the commissioner's wife, was part of the owners' meetings. When the owners would get together in the spring, it was her responsibility to put together some sort of entertainment for the families and some of the owners if they wanted to attend. So it was her goal for years to try to get some of these women who really were behind the scene, that people didn't really know that much about, but had witnessed so much. So for several years, she tried to get Mrs. Rooney of the Steelers, Mrs. McCaskey of the Bears, Mrs. Hunt of the Chiefs, and of course Mrs. Ford of the Lions to sit down and have a discussion, just about their lives and what they had witnessed over the years. And it took her several years to get everyone to say to say yes. They all said no in the beginning. And Jane Goodell, she just kept working on them, well, if this one says yes, will you say yes? And if you say yes, will the other one say yes? Finally, she got them all to sit down, and that was for the owners' meetings in March of 2018. So I got a call from the NFL asking me would I be interested in working on something if they wanted to go ahead and do something on these 4 women. And I really wasn't sure. I didn't know what the stories would be. And then they had the panel discussion. And 5 minutes after the discussion, I got another phone call, and it was like, we have great stories, we have great stuff. Why don't we sit down and talk about it? And that's really how it started.
That's fantastic. Now, this is the 100th anniversary of the NFL. How important are Martha Ford, Virginia McCaskey, Norma Hunt, and Patricia Rooney to this league's history?
Oh, absolutely. They go back to the beginning. You look at Mrs. McCaskey. She will be 97, I believe, in January. The league is 100 years old, so she hasn't missed very much. And in our documentary, we actually tell some stories that go back to the time when Red Grange was playing and her interactions with Red Grange, if you can believe it. But each one of them, in their own way, they've made a mark. And it was it was in the beginning, it was sort of a challenge. It's like, well, what do we do with this story? Okay, we've got these 4 women and they do have these stories. How do we tell it? How do we make this different from anything else? How do we make it that it's 4 women's stories that are all different? So we, started to study it, and I noticed that each one has their own specific role with their team or city. And they were very different, even though they've witnessed a lot of the same history and been involved, together for years and years. They all had a different take on the history of the league. And that's what we did. We went after those different aspects of their life and how to tell those stories.
Great. So let's hit on some of those briefly. I've been covering sports in Michigan for over 30 years. I can count on one hand the number of interviews I've seen with Martha Ford. How did you get her to open up, and what really stood out about her to you?
Well, I did actually spend a lot of time with Mrs. Ford, and she was great. She was really great. In the beginning, I don't know how much she trusted us and what we wanted to do. It's not something she had done before. And it just took time, and we spent time with her. And I worked with someone from the Lions, Bill Keenest, and he and I would go back and forth, and we would present things to her and make requests. The one thing I wanted to do was, Mrs. Ford is unique in that Mrs. Ford is still in the everyday running of her team, as where the other 3 aren't. They have different roles, but Mrs. Ford is involved in the day-to-day. So I wanted to try to capture a little bit of that, and I requested, okay, we have to have a camera up with the family and shoot her watching a game. And right away it was no. We don't do that. We don't do that. But, little by little, she became receptive to the idea, and we got very, very lucky. It was the Sunday night game last year against the Patriots, and we were going to be allowed to shoot 1 quarter. And, so we shot the family watching the game and entering, the normal B-roll type shots that you would have for this kind of a story. But the Lions took the lead, and the Lions had the lead, and the Lions were 0-2 at the time, and the Patriots had just come off a loss, and we knew that they would probably be out, to win, of course, and it was the Patriots. And as the game went on, I'm expecting, okay, this is it. Now we're going to get kicked out of the booth. But as we entered the 4th quarter, I finally said to, someone from the Lions, we can't leave. This is unbelievable if they hang on and win. We've got to get these reactions. Well, they do go on and lead to win. And then I said, now we have, what does she do now? What will she do after a game? And he said, well, she'll go down and congratulate the coach. And Matt Patricia, this was his first win. He said, but I don't think that's something that they'll let you shoot. Well, they did. And I think that was some of the best video that we were able to get. Everyone was so excited, and we really got them in the moment. So that's a long answer to your question, but no, Mrs. Ford was great, and she ended up trusting us, and we really had a good time working with her throughout the production of the film.
You are clearly a man who knows how to twist an arm gently. George Halas, one of the league founders, his daughter Virginia Halas McCaskey owns the Bears now. Was that like spending moments with a history book?
There's no question about it. As a matter of fact, you're not the first person to describe it that way. Absolutely. She's a museum in herself. And the incredible thing about Mrs. McCaskey is her mind is so sharp. She's sitting there telling us stories about what it was like, and as I started to say before, the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and she's giving us detail to all these stories, and you just can't believe that how much history she's lived.
Norma Hunt's late husband Lamar famously named the Super Bowl. I love hearing her talk about the 65 toss power trap. She just has a passion for that, doesn't she?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in our story, as I referred to before, everyone had a role. Her role was she is the ultimate sports fan. She loves football. She loves going to the games. She loves everything about it. So for her, I don't know how many people know, she's been to every Super Bowl. That's 53 of them. And to the best anyone can find out, she's the only woman. And the only woman, the other 6 are media people, that are doing it, press people. So she was really great, and she loves the game, absolutely loves the game.
And Patricia Rooney boasts the most rings in the group. How willing was she to talk about the humble beginnings of that franchise?
Well, she spoke about it. I mean, she married into that family. Her story's interesting because she lives in the house that Dan grew up in. She lives there today. It's in downtown Pittsburgh. She loves the city, and has, other than the time that he was an ambassador in Ireland, she's lived in Pittsburgh, her whole life. She did talk about the humble beginnings. We also interviewed her kids, some of her kids, and they talked about having to drive around in a station wagon that said, I think it was the official car of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this was before they won any games, in the playoffs, and they would get booed. So that was sort of a funny story that all of a sudden changes with the Immaculate Reception.
Yeah, and again, our guest here is Joe Levine, the director of A Lifetime of Sundays. Joe, when you put a wrap on this project, what was the feeling in your head and in your heart once you were finished with this, when you put a wrap on it?
Wow. What was my feeling? Well, I think I got to work on a very unique project with 4 very, very unique women. And it was really, I mean, it sounds corny, but at the end of the day, it really was an honor to meet these women and spend time with these women, and to hear their stories, and to be able to just sit down next to them and talk to them. That was really great, and it's something I'll always remember. I've worked on a lot of these sports documentaries over the years, but this one was definitely different.
Well, I'm sure this will be a piece of history going forward as the NFL celebrates year number 100. Joe Levine, thanks for joining us on Big Game Bound. The final drive takes us to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Fantasy Football Hall of Famer Bob Harris of Football Diehards is ready for your fantasy football questions. Bob, I'm going to ask one for myself first. I'm a Mahomes owner. How worried should we be about this injured ankle right now? Only 1 touchdown pass in the past 2 weeks for him.
You should be a little more worried about the ankle than the no touchdown passes. No touchdowns happen on occasion. Not often for him, but it goes back to something we talked about, Jack, going into the season was, how much you're going to pay for a quarterback versus other players. Regression has been a thing for every quarterback who's led the league in touchdown passes over the last 10 years, except one. I don't know that it will be with Mahomes. Maybe he picks it back up. He's capable easily of having 4 touchdown games. We've seen that. So, I mean, you're not playing him, right? I mean, that's the big key here. You're going to keep rolling him out there until such time as he's not rolling out there. I'm a little worried about some of his weapons. There's been more issues, I think, that he has. And defenses are catching up a little bit, and they're bound to, but his skill set is so unique that I'm gonna keep playing him no matter what.
All right, how do you handle your defenses? Do you just have one and you play it all year, or are you looking for matchups and do you pick some up if you see one on waivers that can maybe help you out a little bit the next week?
Yeah, I think streaming defenses is great, or if you play daily fantasy sports like I do, you can play any defense, and in those cases, I'm often targeting opposing quarterbacks who might not be in good positions. I'm looking at you, Delvin Hodges of the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. The Chargers maybe have a great matchup. The Patriots against Daniel Jones with what's likely to be a diminished group of skilled players around him. Sam Darnold in his first game back against the Cowboys. Any team playing the Dolphins, maybe even the Redskins. And as much as I like to leverage the turmoil in Washington to a strong defensive play, I'm not sure that the Dolphins are going to be able to do that. But that's kind of how I focus. I can stream, and if I'm picking from multiple defenses, I try to pick on the least impressive quarterback, if at all possible. I'm looking for turnovers and disruptive plays.
All right, some questions from viewers. Bob, Jen asks, better receiver, Deontay Johnson or Preston Williams?
In a vacuum, I think this is even a tough question. I like Preston Williams an awful lot. Having talked to people in Miami dating back into the preseason, everyone has been talking about this guy, maybe the guy that over the long term has the most value. I think Deontay Johnson's in a really good spot, all things being equal with the teams, but they're not right now because the aforementioned Delvin Hodges is the quarterback. I think this week, you look at what Williams has done with Josh Rosen in the last 2 games, He's having like nearly a 30% target share. Williams already the team's leader in receptions and yardage over the full season. So I think he's the guy I'd rather play right now, especially given the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. Might vary from week to week if the quarterback situation changes, but for the foreseeable future, the 6'5" Preston Williams looks like a pretty reasonable play, especially for a team that's going to be playing from behind a lot. Maybe they can get some things figured out, throwing the ball down the field.
All right, Berserker King wants to know, Golden Tate, better days ahead? Or are we looking at a wide receiver 4 or 5 with him?
I think better days are ahead. Look, the Giants brought Tate in for a reason. He's very good out of the slot. That's where they're going to run him. Assuming Sterling Shepard gets healthy at some point, he'll play outside. But Tate is among the best in the league and has been for a number of years, creating yards after the catch, the king of yards after the catch, I think, self-proclaimed, and with good reason. So you look at all the components of this offense that are ailing now, maybe Tate will be asked to do even more this week. It's not a great matchup against the Patriots. I think they'll have a little something for Daniel Jones. But I think over the course of the season, Tate's going to serve you pretty well as a wide receiver 3 level player.
Josh Jacobs had himself a day against the Chicago Bears. Is he an every week running back going forward?
He has been for me all along. Look, I like to play workloads. There's a lot of volatility, as we've seen early in the season, especially early in the season. I do think it tends to normalize as we head into October, November. And as it gets colder, teams tend to run the ball a little more. I think Jacobs is a great play. He's also reasonable as a receiver. I wish they'd throw him the ball more. And I wish the floor was a little higher. We saw the 4-point game against Minnesota a couple weeks ago, had another single-digit game. But I expect more double digits going forward over the course of the season. I like the role.
All right, Bob, this is Bob Harris, footballdiehards.com. You can catch him every week, 6 to 8 on Sirius XM. You can read him on footballdiehards.com or watch him here on Big Game Bound every Thursday when our show streams at 1 o'clock. Bob, always love talking to you. We'll talk to you again next week. All right, that'll wrap up week 6 of Big Game Bound. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right here every Thursday during the NFL season with a new episode streaming at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Big shout out to John Telich, Aaron Levine, Mark Carpenter, Ty Halleck, our guest Joe Levine, our producer Spencer Wheelock, and the rest of our studio crew. I'm Jack Doles. Enjoy week 6 of the National Football League.